COVID-19 brought a lot of changes to the way in which we have consumed theatre over the last year. The pandemic caused a lot of tension, turbulence and turmoil for the theatre, but it also brought a lot of community support and togetherness through the fight to get back onto the stage. One person who spearheaded a lot of this support in the UK was none other than Andrew Lloyd Webber. In my opinion, he earned so much respect from both myself, but also the wider theatre community for going above and beyond supporting a lot of aspects of theatre. From streaming his own products for free on YouTube to setting up and contributing to many charities. So, how do we take these facts in light of what is currently happening with the West End's The Phantom of the Opera? If you haven't already seen in the news, then you may or may not know that Phantom in the West End has had a lot of struggles during the pandemic, from an initial announcement by Cameron Mackintosh that it would be permanently shutting down, to Andrew Lloyd Webber claiming it would come back in its original form, to now undergoing a facelift. We heard rumours galore, from changed choreography to avoid paying Gillian Lynne royalties, to altering the supposedly mangled sets to be more cost effective. And then of course there was the rumour of a reduced cast and orchestra akin to the tour version. The announcement of the revamp caused a bit of an upset in the UK, including a petition against it. But we were promised by Andrew that the brilliant original would return in all of its 1986 splendour. But then, on the 12th of April 2021, it was announced that contrary to the promise made by Lloyd Webber, the London Orchestra was going to be reduced by 50% and replaced with the cold, hard steel of technology. But also that many other of the rumoured changes were likely to be true. So what does it matter for both the Phantom and also the West End? Classic FM reported that all 27 members were released from their contracts while Her Majesty's Theatre was undergoing refurbishment, with hopes they might be rehired. Now, while 14 musicians can re-audition for the show's return on 21st of July, 13 of the jobs no longer exist. A tough decision to make, and I imagine one that wasn't made lightly, as even the producers of the Broadway version of Phantom have condemned the decision to cut the musicians across the pond. But at the end of the day, there are big pros and cons to both sides. One could argue that removing 13 musicians is better for the long-term survival of a show, particularly if it's financially strained, and consequently is beneficial for the employment of those musicians who are rehired. Well, the statement released by Lloyd Webber and Mackintosh state that the cuts are happening for two reasons. One is the financial cost associated with Phantom and the hopes that they can break even every week.
The margins, say for a big musical, are very, very, very tight. I mean, if you were to take, say you were talking a really big musical, like say the Disney Frozen that's hopefully coming into Drury Lane next year. Say they were operating at £500,000 a week. The biggest slice of that, of course, goes in VAT. And I would reckon that Disney would be very lucky to make their investment back on that show for perhaps 2-3 years. At least. And that's really at full capacity. The margins are incredibly, incredibly tight.
Lloyd Webber stated, "The only way to create a Phantom with any hope of a weekly break-even, let alone recoupment, is for the producers to contribute pre-existing physical assets to a new set, and in so doing, to take the hit in other productions of Phantom due to make use of those assets around the world." The other is to supposedly create a modern sound and give this timeless score the freshness of a new musical, which is just PR fluff really. Adam Krauthamer is quoted to say on the matter, "Producers who take advantage of a worldwide pandemic in order to cut live music are cheapening their productions and robbing the audience of a full experience of musical theatre. Something which I agree with on the basis of the experience of musical theatre. But this is just one facet to consider because, like I said, a playhouse is a business first and an experience second. Without revenue, there is no orchestra, full stop." And this is what drives me to the point of this video, because for me, it throws together an interesting juxtaposition between art and business. Does the West End have a moral obligation to only be beneficial to its artists? And how does someone ethically make that decision to prioritise cost over their staff and overall product? Would there even be a Phantom if these measures weren't taken? And also I'd like to ask, is it wise to dilute your product to make more profit? But for me at least, this throws into the air this question of the wider context of contemporary theatre, where usually art and artists do take a back seat to business.
We have an amazing band of 10 people.
10.
Now, I'm not going to pussyfoot around the idea that a theatre house is a business that needs a lot of profit to keep investors, sponsors and producers content, particularly in the West End. I'm also not going to hide away from the fact that the Phantom is likely more so considered a commercial product now than an artist or composer's refreshing piece of life-changing work. But does it make sense to reduce the orchestra by 50% for a show that essentially has music as its driver? If any show in London should prioritise their live orchestra, you'd think this would be the one. And for a show that is often hailed as being a hugely successful, profit-making enterprise, it arouses an element of suspicion in what we were told by these producers. My instinct was to believe that they were making these cuts to just generate more profit at the sacrifice of these musicians, and that could be true. But I have to take into account what Andrew Lloyd Webber has done for the theatre, and I have to reason that these decisions were likely made to secure a future, as opposed to cutting corners to save just a little bit of money. But that might be naive of me. In the same statement, Lloyd Webber mentioned that the revamp was a process that was going to cost 5 times more than their reserves, which potentially is why there was this consideration that they wouldn't even bring the show back. But because only a handful of people truly know the financial state of these shows, we have to base our answer to this type of question on what we're given in statements. Well, in the joint statement, they do not say that the show is penniless and in ruin. They just state their decision is a long-term solution to continue to make it profitable. But this, of course, sits on shaky ground, because it's such a tough decision to make that fully benefits a long-term business aspect, rather than the current people that are performing within the show itself. And arguably its overall reputation, because for me, one reason that I go to the theatre is because I'm paying more than just to have a seat with a view, or to listen to a 34-year-old soundtrack. We are paying to support people's dreams, their livelihoods, and more so we are paying for a skill that has been crafted, refined and practiced to a point of professional presentation. We pay for a ticket that has its weight in gold, because so much has already gone into the production before you've even sat down. So will I go and watch Phantom? Probably, because I still want to go and support people fulfilling their dreams. But I know I would much rather support 27 musicians than 14. Because like Mac Dickinson, the percussionist for Phantom, tweeted out, "I sacrifice so much willingly to be a part of this wonderful show, and yet I will leave with nothing more than the shirt on my back. No severance to speak of, and my livelihood, and that of my family in absolute tatters. I don't even have the opportunity to re-audition for my job, and I'm unclear as to what the future holds." The dilution of theatre is indicative of a harrowing future where the theatre may be so streamlined that there is no orchestra in the future, and sets are replaced by screens. In a lot of ways, we're halfway there. But it also raises an ethical problem which conflicts business and art, people and profits. In a joint statement, Lloyd Webber and Mackintosh said that they believe the new orchestrations to be just as thrilling and rich as the original, and that the shift would help ensure that the music of the night will soar for decades more. But what music will be soaring for decades more? Will the connection between musical theatre and large orchestras be limited from now on, if even the Phantom and the Opera cannot sustain an orchestra? Well, only time will tell. But let's hope that if Phantom ever does go down like the Titanic, it'll at least have an orchestra to play as it goes. So I'd love to hear your opinions on the matter. I think for me it's a really interesting situation that's going on with Phantom. I know from myself that I would like to believe Andrew on the back of everything that he has done for theatre, but you know, there is this niggling away at me that thinks, you know, who's pulling the strings behind these decisions. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more content. Stay safe.